Anyway, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Robert Smith, and I'm a recovering youth pastor.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, thank you. I knew somebody would get me, all right? All right. So a little bit of my story. I served on full-time church staff as a youth pastor for 5 years. And as I was on staff as youth pastor, this was a ministry that God gave me literally from the day I graduated high school. I jumped into youth ministry. And that was a scary thing because some church was dumb enough to hire an 18-year-old to be their youth pastor. And fortunately, I didn't kill any of the students. And, you know, it was decent. And I was absolutely terrified of parents whenever I first started youth ministry. I didn't want to talk to them, didn't want to connect with them. I just wanted to connect with their students. And as God moved me from one staff position to another that was full-time at a bigger church, I really started to love doing what I was doing with the students, but realized that there was a huge need to impact the parents that the students were going back home to. Because here's what was happening. Parents were asking me questions like this. They're saying things like, who's a 50 Cent? What's an M&M? If my kid plays Grand Theft Auto, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Which, by the way, any video game that has a felony for the title, it's probably a bad idea, right? And quickly, parents were admitting to me, Robert, we are extremely oblivious about the world our kids are living in. And God began to birth the ministry inside of me that was basically just not to impact students, but to impact parents as well. To realize that my impact was minimal compared to the impact that you have in the home. And God began to put this vision in my heart to travel and speak to students, but to also equip, encourage parents along the way. And so that ministry launched about 6 years ago, and I get to travel the country and speak at youth camps and conferences, but also I have the privilege of getting to be a part of lots and lots of parent conferences like this. I also have the privilege of getting to write, I think your church actually subscribes to it, but Lifeway puts out a magazine called Living with Teenagers, and I write a teen culture section in that monthly. I put out a free monthly resource called The Culture Connection that does just that. It keeps parents up to date on the world their kids are living in. And so, no, that's my heart whenever we do this afternoon. I'm not here to tell you how to parent because I don't know how to do that. But I am here to tell you about the world that your kids are living in. I'm here to partner with you so that hopefully as the gap gets bigger between you and your student, that hopefully what my ministry can do is kind of bridge that gap and make it smaller so you can understand what your kids are up against, what culture's teaching them, what they're saying to them, how you can stay up to date with it, and then ultimately share with them God's truth on the issues that they're really, really struggling with. So that's what you're going to get to see this afternoon. Please know that this talk is not designed to be a scare tactic, okay? If you walk out of here and there was actually some text up there that said this, not a scare tactic, because that by itself is pretty awkward. But this isn't designed to be a scare tactic. This is something that hopefully you'll walk out of here and say, hey, man, we know what's going on in the world that our students are living in and what they're struggling with. So here's what we're going to look at. Whenever we talk about teen culture, whenever we talk about understanding it, I think it's important that we approach it with the right view and with the right mentality. So if you would, just kind of think of it this way. Suppose that somebody feels called to the mission field, and somebody were to go and they were going to minister to a third world country, to a different group of people that they'd never met, didn't know anything about this group. In fact, I have friends right now that are on the mission field, and they're doing this kind of work. And before they were ever able to get on the field, they had to study the 6 things that make up a foreign people group. So these 6 things on the screen here make up a foreign people group. They've got their own dress, their own food, their own music, their own rituals, their own language, and their own values. Okay? 6 things. So if somebody were to go and minister to the Chinese people group, they would take 2 years of their life to understand these 6 things. One thing they never do. They never show up in China and look at a Chinese person and go, really? You're wearing that ridiculous outfit? Like, that's so dumb. Like, why would you wear that? You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't walk into a Chinese restaurant and go, chopsticks? Really? You guys are going to use chopsticks? That's just ridiculous. What about cheeseburgers? Where are the cheeseburgers? You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't insult them for speaking their native tongue. Okay, pause for a second. Look at the screen again. 6 things make up a foreign people group. How many of you have a teenager in your home? Okay, and if you don't, you're here because you work with teenagers. You get it. 6 things. They have their own dress, their own food, their own music, their own rituals, their own language, and their own values. You are raising a foreign tribe member in your home, all right? Sure enough. How can they live off of pizza and Pop-Tarts? We don't know, okay? But they do, and somehow they don't roll over dead, all right? They survive. They make it. They've got their own things that make up their own people group. But yet a lot of times what happens is this, is we begin to insult them, right? Oh, why do you listen to that music? It sounds like Satan screaming through the microphone. Pull your pants up. What's your problem? We automatically, right? We look at the things that we don't understand. We point them out, and that's what we do. And I'm here this afternoon to propose that maybe our effectiveness would be so much more, and it would be deeper if we took the time to get to understand the world that these students are living in. And if we began to view them as a mission field, and we began to say, I want a deep and detailed understanding of what makes them tick. Why? Not because I agree with it, not because I like all of it, not because I even want to participate in it, but because this generation should matter to us enough that we're willing to invest our energy, effort, time, and money to understand where they're coming from. Why? Because I want to teach them God's truth. Because as mom and dad, you want to be the one that's instilling God's principles and God's truth on the issues that they're really struggling with. But we can't do that if we don't understand what they're struggling with. We don't understand the world that they're living in. So this is a very biblical idea. And this comes all the way from the Apostle Paul. And Paul kind of set some groundwork in the book of Acts. He was ministering to a group of people that he wasn't familiar with, a group of people that he had never met, a culture that he wasn't really familiar with. And so this is what Paul says. This is what the scripture says. It says, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To an unknown God. Now what you worship is something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. So before he ever speaks to this group of people that he knows nothing about, what does he say the first thing he did was? This group participation, you're not going to get in trouble, I promise, all right? What did he say the first thing he did was?
He gave him a compliment.
Yeah, he did. He gave him a compliment, okay? Absolutely. He said, I see that you're very religious. And before he even spoke to them, he told them that he did what? I walked around. And when he walked around, he said he did what? Yeah, he looked very carefully at their objects of worship. So before he ever spoke to this group of people that he wasn't familiar with, he said, I walked around and I looked carefully. I observed. I paid attention. And then he gave him a compliment. Now, it would have been easy for him to go, really? You guys are serving these four? You're stupid. Why in the world would you do that? That's not what he does. He points out and he goes, I see in every way you're very religious. Like, man, you're trying. But your efforts are directed in the wrong way. Your efforts are directed in something that's pointless, it's meaningless, it's not going to fulfill you. And he points them to the one true God. And he even goes on to quote their famous poets of their day just a few verses later. It would have been the equivalent of him quoting a popular artist like Jay-Z or Eminem or somebody from their culture that they would have been extremely familiar with. He quotes them and says, now this is what they say, but here's the truth about God. Here's the truth versus what your culture is teaching and what your culture is saying to you. And so that's what I want us to do this afternoon is we're going to take a walk. And on this walk, we're going to look at what I consider to be the gods of this generation, okay? We're going to look at the things that this generation worships. And so movies, television, music, internet, and video games are the #1 educator of this generation, okay? #1 educator of this generation. That means they spend more time with these 5 things than they do with anything else. More time than they do in school, more time than they do in your house, more time than they do at the church, more time than anything else they're going to spend with these 5 things. And so we're going to break these 5 things down into 3 categories as we take a walk this afternoon. We're going to look at movies and television, which is what they're watching, music, what they're listening to, internet and video games, what they're interacting with. So that's what we're going to take a glance at. So just to kind of give you an idea before we jump into those. Here, I shared this with your students last night, but this is how rapidly technology has changed. Okay, so we talk about how much time they spend with these things, but look what's happened over the past 20 years. So 20 years ago, the World Wide Web was born. 13 years ago, Google search was launched. 8 years ago, the first social network site was developed. 6 years ago, the first YouTube video was posted. 4 years ago, the first touchscreen smartphone was released. 3 years ago, the App Store opened. And 1 year, now a little close to 2 years, 2 years ago, the first iPad launched. Does anybody else look at that and you just go, wow, that's incredible, right? In the past 20 years, the things that have happened. I shared with your students last night, but think of it like this. If you talk to a student and say, why don't you go and get the encyclopedia and look up some information in that? What? Are you serious? Don't you mean encyclopedia.com, dictionary.com? But for us as adults, it's very important for us to remember our kids never grew up in a world. They don't know of a world without technology like this. They don't know of a world where the web doesn't exist. They don't know of a world where they don't have instant access to anything and everything they want to have access with. And as an adult, it's important for us to get that because that makes up a huge part of their culture and the world that they're living in. And I've got to be able to understand it. One great quote that I heard the other day from Billy Graham. Billy Graham was asked to speak at a technology conference in 1998. And he was asked to speak at this technology conference, and he was speaking to the brightest minds in the technology world. And this is what Billy Graham said in 1998. And he was just referring to all the things that were happening even at that point in technology. And he said, technology in and of itself, inherently, it's not bad. He said, it's all about how we decide to use it. So hear my heart when I share this with you. I'm not the guy that says all technology is bad and having an iPhone or an iPad is bad. It's all about how we use it. I'm going to share things with you this afternoon, and you're probably going to say, Robert, if I put that filter on my computer, my kid could sneak around it if they wanted to. Or if I safeguard my television the way you're telling me to, my kids could sneak around it if they wanted to. Listen to what I'm saying. It's absolutely 100% first and foremost a heart issue. Okay? 100% first and foremost is that it's our responsibility to mold our children's heart and to teach them the principles of God, first and foremost. Yes, if they want to have access to questionable things, they're going to figure it out. And that just didn't apply right now. That applied way before technology was as advanced as it is. If you want to seek something out, they're going to be able to find a way to get their hands on it. However, as adults that God has given us the privilege of raising this generation, we have a responsibility to understand how to protect our homes, to understand what's coming into our homes, how to safeguard it, etc. And so hopefully we'll be able to dive into that and look at it. So television and movies, what this generation is watching. The average teenager is going to spend over 50 hours a week consuming media content, okay? So, by the way, these slides, I didn't make them that way. I promise you that we had some font issues. But the average American teenager is going to spend over 50 hours a week consuming media content. Now, this statistic was done 5 years ago and updated 5 years later. And in that 5-year time frame, as technology has advanced, it's increased by 10 hours the amount of time that students are spending consuming some kind of media content. That next statistic's interesting, that they pack 10 and a half hours worth of media into a 7.5 hour time frame. It's the multitasking generation, right? Going to check my text messages while I surf the web, while I listen to my iPod and solve an algebraic equation with my toes. You've seen this, right? Firsthand. It's the multitasking generation. Not only are they consuming media, but they're consuming it from 3 or 4 different directions all at one time. It is all around them. It's everywhere they go. So whenever we talk about television and movies, it's important to remember that television and movies have taken a turn for the worse. Okay? Who remembers these days? The good old days. If our students were to spend 50 hours with this kind of media content, with Mr. Ed, with Family Matters, with Full House, they definitely wouldn't walk away more intelligent than they were when they first started. However, they wouldn't be exposed to 50 hours of moral corruption like they would today. Television programming even 20, 15 years ago at least had morals that they were trying to get across, life lessons. They depicted the family in a halfway accurate way, whereas today, that's not necessarily the case, especially with what our students are watching. MTV is the most watched television station amongst teenagers and young adults. So who remembers when MTV first came out? Okay? I promise this isn't a trick question. What did MTV show a lot of back then? Music videos. Hello. All right. Seems kind of obvious because what? MTV, music, television. Guess what they show none of today? Music videos. And a lot of people don't know this. These logos that are on the screen, these are their older logos. They have cut off the part that says music television at the bottom. And this was intentional about 2 years ago. And what they said is they have some substations, MTV2, some like that will show music videos. But for the most part, MTV rearranged, they realigned what they were trying to do. And they said, we used to be an entertainer. Now we want to be an educator. Okay, now get that. Because most of the time when we think of an educator, we think, oh, somebody that's teaching in the classroom or whatever. And it's a pretty simple definition. You can see it in all their programming. Here's what they want to do. They understand that they have a generation in the palm of their hands. And by educating, this is what they mean. We want to answer questions about life that they're asking, period. So their programming is going to do just that. They're going to have shows that are going to answer questions that teenagers and young adults are asking about life. So here's basically what you're going to see on MTV is that it's the innovator when it comes to television for teens and young adults. Okay, so they've got reality shows. They're going to have specials and dramatic programs that push the boundaries whenever it comes to sexual activity and other things along those lines. The #1 most watched show on MTV right now is Jersey Shore. So Jersey Shore is in its 4th season, and whenever it comes on, it's going to open to about 8 million people. 8 to 9 million people are going to watch it every time it comes on MTV. So what does Jersey Shore consist of? Well, that's a better question. I'm happy I didn't word it this way and say, what's the point of Jersey Shore? Because I'm still not sure what that is. But the show, basically what it does is they get people that they put within the house. These people all live together. And basically they put all the right ingredients in the house for them to just go out, party, drink, have sex, live, pretty much a reckless lifestyle. And that consists of them going out to the clubs, having sex with random people, etc. And this is by far the #1 most popular show that MTV has. And what question is it answering? Well, it's answering the question that students and young adults are asking about just life in general. It's saying this is what a happy, fulfilled life is supposed to look like. This is it. This is what you strive for. This is what you shoot for. This is what's going to fulfill you. This is what's going to make you content, happy, etc. Now, to be a teenager today, these are just a couple of the other shows that MTV has. They have one, and they have a lot of others. But I Used to Be Fat, The Hard Times of R.J. Berger, Teen Mom. Their newest show that just came out is called I Want My Pants Back. And basically all of these shows, in some shape, form, or fashion, are dealing with issues that they think teens are dealing with. A lot of them struggle with sexuality and things along those lines. But know this, that the vast majority of what's on MTV, it's pretty raunchy. And if it's answering questions that students have, then we've got some issues. Now, MTV pushed it a step further, and they said, you know what? Not only are these kids asking questions, but we're going to give them really good answers. And so they even have websites that are dedicated to sexuality. They've got a whole website called It's My Sex Life. And It's My Sex Life, they literally spent millions of dollars to put together a 50-page booklet that students could download that would answer any question that they'd have about sexuality. It has a list of all STDs. It has a list of all possible birth control methods that you can use. It has a list of how to know if you're ready to be sexually active or not. And again, why would MTV put that out? Because they said these are questions teens are answering, that they're asking that nobody else is willing to answer. So we'll go on to the next slide. So this is kind of how I view it. This generation is constantly bombarded with what I call secondhand sex. Okay? Secondhand sex. So what does that mean? That means just like secondhand smoke, if somebody else is smoking, then what's going to happen is that smoke can affect me even though I'm not smoking. Can't get away from it, can't escape it. Question that parents ask me all the time, what's the biggest difference from when we were growing up to when our kids are growing up? Okay, and I want to answer that. One is this. #1 is the age of first exposure to sexual content is younger now than it has ever been. Okay? That means this, that they're seeing sexuality from all different angles. And not only are they seeing it from all over the place, the exposure to it is much more intense than it's ever been. Say, Robert, I protect my home. Okay? Do you protect Walmart? Do you protect the mall? Do you protect the halls that your kids walk down when they go to school, even if you homeschool? Do you protect the conversations that they have with even other kids that they meet at church that are being exposed to this constantly? Not trying to scare you, but you get what I'm saying, right? It is all over the place. You can take your kids to the mall and they're going to hear songs that you don't want them to hear. They're going to see things that you don't want them to see. It is coming from all over the place. And so this is what statistics show right now, that 72% of teenagers say that their sexual decisions were influenced by television and movies. 72% of them said our decisions were influenced by what we watched on television or what we saw in a movie. Each year, teenagers are going to see about 15,000 sexual references and innuendos on television. 15,000, and only about 170 of these references are about sexual responsibility. And if they are, you know what they're saying. Use protection, be safe, etc. So why does this matter? Okay, before you freak out, because I already see the tension that's in this room, which, by the way, this is what I get to do full time, so I'm used to a lot of that. And I'll just tell you, the motto for my conference is this: let's just embrace awkward, all right? Because if I allowed awkwardness to make me stop what I was doing, I would never do this. So this would be a good time to say welcome to my conference, all right? Welcome to the awkwardness. So why does this matter? Well, let me tell you. Here, let's use this as a metaphor here, okay? Suppose that I've got a sponge, and I've got two separate buckets up here. And I take this sponge, and I dip this sponge in this bucket over here. And I allow this sponge to spend time in this bucket, and it's just going to hang out there for a while. And then I take this sponge out of that bucket, and it's completely full, okay? And I don't squeeze the sponge or anything like that, but it's completely consumed with the water from this bucket. If I take it and I put it over in this bucket, guess what? It's not going to consume any of the water from that bucket. It's going to be in the bucket. It's going to be there, but it's not going to consume the water from that bucket. You're like, great, thank you for the lesson. What does it matter? Well, here's the point. Home is this bucket. And what I want to do at home is I want to fill my students with God's truth. As parents, let me tell you what your students are telling me. They're saying, your opinion, Mom and Dad, matters to me more than anybody else's opinion. And so what they're saying is, please fill my sponge. Fill my sponge with God's standard. Fill my sponge with your wisdom. Fill my sponge with your insight. Train me, teach me, mold me about life. If we don't do that, and if that sponge is only half full from home, or if that sponge is only a quarter full, then guess what? We're going to pull it out of that bucket, and it's going to be dipped over here into the world. It's going to be dipped in school. It's going to be dipped at work. It's going to be dipped into all those other things. And guess what? There's going to be room that's left for it to soak in what everybody else says. There's going to be room to soak in what MTV says. There's going to be room to soak in what their friends say. And the reason that I do what I do is because I'm passionate about just encouraging you as parents and saying this: yes, your opinion matters to this generation. Absolutely. If you're waiting for them to give you a plaque, or if you're waiting for them to give you a medal, that's not going to happen. They're never going to walk up to you and say, yes, thank you for talking to me about this. Now, here's what I want to say. A lot of parents will come up to me and go, Robert, the reason I don't talk to my kids about sexuality is because it's awkward. It is awkward, isn't it? It's true. It's awkward to talk to your students about sexuality. My nephew lived with us for 3 years, and my wife and I did things completely backwards. We're the parents of a 2-year-old little girl now, but before my daughter came onto the scene, we thought, hey, let's raise a teenager. And so we were the legal guardians of my 15-year-old nephew for 3 years. And in the midst of that time, I found out several things. One, I found out that there's no creature on the face of the earth that will make you want to cuss more than a teenager. Some of you are judging me right now, and that's fine. Go for it, all right? And then there are others of you that are like, yeah, buddy, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so in the time that my nephew lived with me, I found out, yeah, it is awkward. Why? Because you pick him up from school, and you get him in the car, and you say, hey, how was basketball practice? It was good. It was good. How was math? It was good. It was good. All right. So, what the Bible says about masturbation? Oh, y'all are like, did he just say that? Awkward, right? Yes. We don't even want to talk about it in church, let alone talk to our kids about it. And we don't talk to them about it. It doesn't come up. And then we think, well, why in the world? They're not interested. They're not curious. No, they are. And MTV's saying, yep, we'll tell them all about it. Keep that sponge half full, because we would love for them to dip it in everything that we've got to offer, and we'll tell them all that they want to know. We'll let them know anything and everything that they want to know. That's why it's important that we understand that, yes, your opinion does matter. And yes, regardless of how we safeguard our homes, our students are curious and they do want to know answers to these questions that they're asking. And so on to, this will be a lot less awkward, I'm sure. There were just talking about television, okay? Before 2009, there had only been about 1 or 2 openly homosexual teenage characters on television. The television show Glee comes out. There's an infectious character called Kirk on this show. Everybody loves Kirk, fall in love with him. Primetime program says we need more characters like Kirk. 2009, there were 18 gay characters on primetime schedules. At least 5 of those shows were geared towards teenagers. Right now, as of 2011, there are over 24 homosexual teenage characters on TV. 1 prior to 2007. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, over 24. Culture, big time, is making a push to this generation of students saying, hey, you have to make a decision about your sexuality, and you need to make it young. They're making such a push. In fact, the character from Glee, Kirk, he says that he gets letters from 8-year-olds that tell him, thank you for being who you are because it's taught me that I can be who I am. 8-year-olds. Hopefully this video clip, we'll try to run it. We'll see if this will go. And it might not. Okay, that's okay. Don't worry about it. This was a commercial. And this commercial was from the It Gets Better project, and it ran during the finale of American Idol last year. And basically, this is a project that's geared towards teenagers that are struggling with homosexuality. And the message says this. It says, it gets better. And so the whole idea is that, hold on, while you're in high school, while you're in junior high, don't do anything drastic. It gets better. They have Lady Gaga, Anne Hathaway, Chaz Bono, lots and lots of celebrities that speak on this issue and say it gets better. Okay? The irony of it all is the very last person to make an appearance on this video is Woody from Toy Story. And Woody comes on and says it gets better. So as a dad of a 2-year-old daughter, immediately the first thing that crosses my mind is that message geared towards a teenager? Parents, what do y'all think? Who's Woody talking to? My little girl that turns on Toy Story and goes, Buzz, Woody, I love those guys. She's familiar with them. So what's the message that's being sent? Hey, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, it gets better. There's a choice to be made about your sexuality. Why do I share this with you? Well, I share it with you because this generation, just from my perspective and getting to do what I do, culture is forcing our students to wrestle with these issues at younger ages than they've ever had to wrestle with them before. And we've got one of 2 options. Our option is we can turn around the other direction and pretend like it's not happening, or we can be aware of it. We can be aware to the fact that we even begin at young ages to have conversations with our kids, even talking to them about sexuality. Well, what do you mean? Simple things like, what does it mean to be a boy? What does it mean to be a girl? What does it mean that God uniquely created you that way? That part of that creation is that you are going to be feminine as a girl. You're going to be masculine as a boy. What does that look like? What does it mean when we say that God created man to be with woman? Just simple things along those lines. Why? Those are all ways that we're taking that sponge and we're filling it up so that over here the sponge isn't being filled up with something else. We'll go on to the next slide here. Man, I would love to talk to you guys about this, but we'll keep going. Still with television and movies, by the age of 18, the average American teenager is going to have seen over 200,000 acts of violence on television. We'll keep going. Still with television and movies, 70% of all primetime programming depicted alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drug use. Keep on rolling. So here are some things that hopefully will be helpful. These are some suggestions, okay? Hopefully this is the point where we do some resourcing. In our overwhelmedness, we'll kind of go to the side for a second and we'll still address some of these things. So one of the big questions is, okay, you've talked about all the stuff that's on television, all the things our kids are seeing in movies. How do we stay up to date with that? Well, one way, kidsinmind.com. Kidsinmind.com is going to be a website that you can go to that throws the rating system out the window. All right? So it throws it out of the window. How many of you have shown up to the movie and had that oops moment? Have you done that with your family? You're watching a PG-13 rated movie and you're going, oh boy, PG-13 is not what it used to be. PG is not what it used to be, right? So kidsinmind.com throws the rating system out of the window. On a scale of 1 to 10, it says sexuality, 1 to 10, okay? Does it insinuate a sex scene or does it actually show a sex scene? It's going to let you know what's in there. Scale of 1 to 10, it's going to talk about violence. It's going to say scale of 1 to 10. Does it insinuate violence? Does it show violence? Does it show somebody getting shot? Does it show blood? What does it show? It's going to let you know. It's going to do the same thing with profanity, so you're not going to have an oops moment. PluggedInOnline.com does the same thing. This is from a Christian perspective, and so Plugged In Online is going to let you know the content that's in movies, the content that's in television shows, and a lot of times they'll even have further discussion questions. So if you want to go and watch a movie with your family and then hopefully have a discussion with them that maybe is addressing some things in culture, some messages that students are seeing, or even trying to bring some redeemable value to entertainment, PluggedInOnline.com is going to do that. And then CommonSenseMedia.org, they're going to do the same thing. Plugged In Online does television shows. They're not always up to date with the most recent shows. A lot of times they are, but sometimes they'll miss them. So say, for instance, your daughter comes home and says, man, I love Pretty Little Liars. And you say, what's that movie? Well, you're going to go to or what's that television show? You're going to go to Common Sense Media. They're going to tell you that television show was based off of a set of popular teenage books. They're going to tell you that ABC Family, which, by the way, ignore the part where they call themselves family, all right? That ABC Family is going to air this show, and that it has a lesbian character in it, and they actually show make-out scenes with girls pretty frequently in Pretty Little Liars on ABC Family. It's going to give you that information, okay? And it's going to tell you, hey, if this is what your kid's plugging into, this is the message that they're getting, this is what they're seeing. Those stars by those suggested resources, by the way, if you have a smartphone, they have free applications, so you can download these apps, and before you rent a movie or do anything like that, you're going to have knowledge of what's on there. Has anybody ever heard of ClearPlay before? ClearPlay, you guys are going to love this, okay? ClearPlay.com. So this is a DVD player that you can buy. And it's a ClearPlay DVD player, and in the front of the ClearPlay DVD player, it has a USB port. And so this USB port in the front of the player allows you to use your little thumb drive, go online, and download filters for movies. So suppose that you wanted to rent, I don't know, I'm trying to think what just came out on DVD this week, Puss in Boots, okay? And so you hear that this movie's animated, your kids are going to watch it, but then you go to kidsinmind.com and go, really? They have sexual innuendos, different things like that. Don't want to let my kids watch it. So you're going to download the filter on clearplay.com. You're going to plug it into your DVD player. You're going to put that movie in your DVD player, and it's going to seamlessly edit out any questionable content that you didn't want to be in that movie. So it's going to have about 30 or 40 different ways to filter the movie. It's going to say, do you just want to keep mild violence, or do you want to edit out all violence? Do you want to edit out all cuss words? Do you want to edit out? It's going to let you set it up completely. And so you're going to be able to set up, like you've seen those movies before, right? Where there was that one scene that if it didn't have it, it didn't even apply to the movie, but they threw it in there. It will edit that out as you decide to allow it to edit it out. And that's a great way to even find some common ground with your student that may say, I really want to watch this movie. Well, okay. We won't watch it in the movie theater, but whenever it comes out on DVD, we'll rent it. We'll slap the filter from ClearPlay on there, and we'll have a family-friendly viewing experience at home. Highly suggest it. The DVD player is going to cost you about $100. The filter is going to cost you $7 a month or $50 a year. Great investment for your family. So I know at this point, the initial reaction during my conferences, whenever you're hearing me speak, if you're anything like me, as I study culture and I see what's going on, and my daughter's 2 years old, and one of her favorite movies at this point is Tangled, and the whole idea of moving out into the middle of nowhere and building a giant tower and isolating my daughter from humanity for the rest of life sounds really appealing. Anybody else? Like, yeah, I mean, that would be great. We'll just go over there, and all you need is mom and dad, and that's good to go. And I know a lot of times we feel like that. You look at the world your kids are growing up in and go, man, this guy came and gave this conference, and this is just overwhelming. I want to encourage you before we go into our break with the words of Jesus. And this is what he says in John chapter 15, verses 15 through 17, and the last part of 18. He's praying to God, and he says, "My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of it. So sanctify them by the truth." What does he say is the truth? What does he say is the truth? Your word is truth. And as you sent me into the world, I have sent them into the world. So Jesus prays to God, and he addresses this very issue. He says, my prayer, don't take them out of the world. But God still has faith and belief in humanity and us as mankind. The reason I know that is because he hasn't taken us off of the face of the earth yet. Jesus hasn't come back. The rapture hasn't happened. We're all still here, which means that God looks at humanity and says, I still believe in you. I still have faith that you can accomplish my purpose, and I want to use you to do that. Our existence is important, and so he says, sanctify them by the truth, so that we can teach our students, this generation, God's standard on the issues that their friends are struggling with, on the issues that they hear talked about at school, on television, etc., so that they can know God's truth. What's the coolest thing that can happen? Well, in my personal opinion, I get to speak to students all across the country, but my impact is minimal compared to their impact amongst their peers and amongst their friends. That if a student could walk out of the One Life Conference this weekend, and if they're passionate about their relationship with Jesus, and they dive into that, and they become sanctified by his truth, and they begin to know his word and get transformed by it, that they can begin to share that with another student in their school that's struggling. That they can begin to share that with that student that's struggling with homosexual tendencies at 14 or 15 years old, and they can lead that student to the Lord, and that student's life is forever changed. You get what I'm saying, right? That this is what Jesus is saying, that this is how life change happens. This is how the world will be transformed. By believers that are sanctified by the truth, sharing it with other people. To know what we believe, why we believe it, and not to ignore what's going on in culture. No, we don't gratify it. We don't glorify it. But we tell our students God's standards on these issues so they can share them with their friends. And so hopefully that will be some encouragement to you.